Okay, so we all know the story, right? Adam, Eve, a beautiful garden, and just one single rule. Don't eat the fruit from that one tree. And what happens? They do. And boom, humanity is doomed. It's literally the foundational story of sin and punishment in the Western world. But what if we've been reading it all wrong? What if this isn't a story about a tragic fall, but a kind of blueprint for something way more profound? Let's take a closer look.
And this, right here, is the classic take. This opening from John Milton's Paradise Lost just perfectly captures that traditional view. For centuries, this is the interpretation that has dominated our art, our philosophy, even our psychology. It's this idea that one single act of disobedience brought all the suffering and death into the world. But here's where we're going to challenge everything. This one simple question just flips the entire narrative right on its head. If it wasn't about disobedience, then what on earth was the story of the Garden of Eden really trying to tell us? To find the answer, we've got to start by looking at the problems with the story as it's usually told. Because when you try to read it literally, you run into some pretty serious logical and philosophical paradoxes that are honestly really hard to square.
I mean, think about it. Why would an all-knowing, all-loving creator put humanity in a garden, tell them to grow and multiply, and then stick a single tempting tree right in the middle of it all? It feels like a setup, right? Like setting them up to fail. The command just seems to contradict the very purpose of life and experience. And according to the philosopher Alvin Boyd Kuhn, this interpretation has inflicted a huge amount of psychological damage, painting a picture of God as inconsistent and putting guilt and fear at the very heart of our culture.
So how do we solve this paradox? Well, the key, according to Kuhn's research, is realizing we're trying to read an ancient text with modern eyes. We've completely lost the ability to speak its original language, and that's the language of symbols. Now, this is what's so fascinating. Look at the difference in purpose here. Modern writing, it's all about making things as clear as possible. But ancient sacred texts, Kuhn argues, were often written to hide and preserve profound truths in these deep layers of allegory and myth. They weren't just broadcasting information for everybody. They were kind of embalming wisdom for those who were initiated enough to actually decode it. And that's the crucial point right there. The authors of Genesis weren't historians trying to record a literal event. Nope, they were dramatists. They were creating a grand play where characters like Adam, Eve, and the serpent weren't actual people, but personifications of universal forces, cosmic principles, and the different stages of human consciousness. So once we have this allegorical key, we can start to unlock the true meaning of the story's famous symbols. And let's start right at the center of the garden, the tree of life. So the tree of life isn't just some plant. It's more like a diagram. Picture a single trunk. That's the one divine source, the unity of everything. Now see it branch out, and those branches branch out again into smaller twigs and leaves. It's a brilliant illustration of how creation works, how that one unified energy of the cosmos flows outward, diversifying into the infinite, countless forms of the material world. Okay, so if the tree is the structure of reality, then what's the fruit? Well, the fruit is the whole reason for that reality. The fruit is experience. So to eat the fruit isn't an act of disobedience. It's a metaphor for engaging with life, for tasting all the bitterness and sweetness of physical existence so you can gain knowledge and wisdom. And the allegory goes even deeper. The juice of the fruit, that's the most precious stuff. It's the wisdom that can only be squeezed out of our experiences under the pressure of life's challenges. Just like it takes tons and tons of grapes to make just a little bit of wine, it takes a vast amount of raw, lived experience to distill a single drop of true spiritual insight. And this leads to a truly stunning connection that ties the Old and New Testaments together in a way you've probably never considered. That cup of juice, the essence of worldly experience that Eve offers to Adam, is allegorically the very same cup of suffering and wisdom that Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane asks to have passed from him. And the tree of life in Genesis, it becomes the tree or the cross on which Christ is crucified. This suggests these aren't separate historical events at all, but two versions of the same cosmic drama of the soul's journey. All right, now for the story's biggest villain. If this whole thing is an allegory, then the character of the serpent has to be completely reevaluated too. For thousands of years, this has been the symbol of pure evil, the enemy of God, the great deceiver of mankind. But in a symbolic drama, its role is way more complex and absolutely essential.
This right here completely flips the script. In the traditional view, the serpent is the bad guy, plain and simple. But in Kuhn's allegorical interpretation, the serpent is a benefactor. It's not an enemy of God, it's a representation of divine law itself. It doesn't trick humanity into a fall, it actually guides humanity toward wisdom.
So, what is this divine law? The serpent symbolizes the great, impersonal, cyclic law of evolution. Think of it like a kind of spiritual gravity. It's the force that pulls spirit down into matter, pushing souls through the necessary cycles of life and death so they can gain experience and evolve. It's not evil at all. It's a fundamental and even beneficial mechanism of the cosmos.
So the crucial takeaway here is that the conflict in the garden isn't a moral battle between good and evil. Not at all. It's a functional opposition of polarity. I mean, you need resistance to build muscle, right? You need a north and a south pole for a magnet to work. And in the exact same way, the universe needs the tension between spirit, Adam, and matter, Eve, guided by natural law, the serpent, for creation and growth to even happen. They're like cooperative opponents in a cosmic dance.
Okay, so with these new symbolic keys, the tree as creation, the fruit as experience, and the serpent as natural law, we can now retell the climax of the story. And it transforms from a tragedy of punishment into this magnificent drama of purpose.
But first, we have to redefine the central punishment, death. In ancient philosophy, death didn't always mean the end of physical life. It was often a term for the soul's journey into a physical body, a death of its unlimited spiritual state as it became confined to a limited temporary physical one. This descent wasn't a punishment, it was the necessary price you had to pay to gain earthly knowledge. So let's reread that whole sequence. First, God states the universal law. To eat the fruit of knowledge, you have to accept the death of incarnation. Second, the serpent, natural law, clarifies this. It basically says, hey, don't worry, this death isn't final. In fact, it's the very process that's going to make you godlike, able to understand good and evil. And then finally comes the choice. The text says Eve saw that the tree was to be desired to make one wise. This wasn't some weak-willed fall into temptation. It was a conscious, intelligent choice made for the sake of enlightenment. And the proof is right there in the text itself. After they eat the fruit, what does God say? He doesn't say, look what you have ruined. He says, behold, the man is become as one of us. The mission was a success. Humanity achieved its goal. It attained a godlike state of consciousness, able to understand the duality of existence. When you read it this way, the entire meaning is just flipped upside down. The story of Eden is no longer about a tragic fall from grace. It becomes a story of a heroic ascent, the brave, necessary first step of the soul, leaving a state of passive innocence to actively go out and pursue divine wisdom in the school of life. And that leaves us with one final, really powerful question. If this allegorical key can so radically change our understanding of a story we thought we knew inside and out, what might happen if we applied it to other myths, other scriptures, other foundational beliefs? What other profound truths, hidden in plain sight, are just waiting for us to rediscover them?